Hello, Ron. Hi, Ollie.
Hi, Marcos. Hi, everyone.
Brilliant. Okay, so this time we are going to do because we're recording this in Sagittarius season in 2024. So we thought we'd just do some plants of Sagittarius, some plants that we would assign to Sagittarius, and I think I can safely say that both of us found this quite tricky. Um,
Indeed.
yeah. So I mean, so for anyone who doesn't know what the hell we're talking about, go and watch. We've done a previous episode called Space Botany that would be, I think it was like episode 3 or something of this podcast that would be a really good primer because that talks about how traditionally different medicines and plants were assigned to different planets, and then you could secondarily assign those to a sign as well. So put them in a specific zodiac sign, depending on several criteria, like the nature, the general nature of a plant and its effects and where it worked in the body would mainly be described by the planet that it was matched with, but secondary characteristics like regions of the body or particular characteristics might be sort of, it was given a secondary assignation to a sign. So anyway, I thought I'd start off just by reading a traditional description of the sign Sagittarius,
Oh,
and
yes.
then we'll get into the plants. And this is, as I did last time with Scorpio, this is from Abu Mashar's abbreviation of the Introduction to Astrology. This is the translation by Charles Burnett, and Abu Mashar lived in the 9th century. So this is medieval Arabic astrology. So he said, Sagittarius is the house of Jupiter and the exaltation of the tail, meaning the south node, in the 3rd degree. It has 3 decans. The first belongs to Mercury, the second to the moon, the third to Saturn. It is masculine, diurnal, bicorporeal, meaning two-bodied. Daylight is at its shortest in its latter part. In other words, in the northern hemisphere, it's getting towards the winter solstice. Of incomplete figure, upright, possessing 2 natures, cut in 2 parts. The first part in human form, royal and noble. The second part possesses 4 feet, which have hooves, because it's a centaur. To it belong beasts of prey and insects of the earth. I thought that was quite interesting. You wouldn't have thought insects with Sagittarius, right? Having few children, half-voiced, master of stratagem, cunning. To it, the body of man are the 2 thighs. And I think we'd probably both add the buttocks and the hips and the whole
Yeah.
pelvic
Yeah.
architecture to that. And that's pretty much where it ends. He goes on to describe some sort of parts of the of Asia which you think are ruled by Sagittarius. So it's pretty interesting. It's like, you know, none of that traditional description particularly matches the modern conception of Sagittarius as the
No.
fun
And just to
loving
go,
joker, does it?
it strikes me, Marcos, the insect thing is, of course, insects have 6 legs, as does Sagittarius.
Yes, yes, 6 limbs. Yes, yeah, of course. Well done. Yeah. That's
And of course,
absolutely true.
spiders with 8 would be Scorpio, because scorpions have 8 limbs.
Yes, yeah. Brilliant. Okay, yeah, that makes total sense. And the other bits of it you can sort of see, like
Yeah.
the two-bodied thing is pretty
Yeah,
obvious because
absolutely.
you've got
Yes.
centaur and master of stratagem. There were 3 signs I think that were described as master of stratagem. I think it was Sag, Capricorn, and Leo. I think interestingly were all
Interesting.
strategists.
Again, I mean, Chiron the centaur was meant to be, taught Achilles everything he knew about battle. I don't know if there's a
Yeah,
connection there, and I suppose the king is the Leo the lion. Don't know about Capricorn. That's a tricky one, isn't it? So,
yeah, we'll get on to that. That's later. We'll do that. We'll do that next. Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. I mean, you can the strat. I agree that the Chiron, the centaurs were traditionally, they had an interesting, because most centaurs, like your average centaur, was kind of a bit rowdy
bit
in
rowdy, bit
mythology.
like, yeah, football fan
Yeah,
sort of
football
thing.
hooligan behavior.
Yeah,
But Chiron was an exceptional centaur. He
exactly.
was
Yeah,
and he was a very wise and taught both the arts of war and healing.
yeah.
So yeah, it's very interesting. Anyway, right. So shall I kick off with? Should we just do a flip flop? So I'll
Yeah,
do
go on. You
then.
start. I'll do mine, and we can agree or disagree. We'll see.
Absolutely, and just chip in, Ollie, and just like get, as usual,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to start with the first plant that I would assign with Sag. So I'm just going to share the screen. We've got, this is ground ivy or Glaucoma heteracea. Now, am I certain that this plant belongs to Sagittarius? No, because it wasn't traditionally described as belonging to any sign. But this is what Culpeper had to say about it in his 17th century herbal. It was also called alehoof because it was used as a bittering agent for beer before hops became standard. So Culpeper said it's a herb of Venus and therefore cures the diseases she causes, and therefore put my teeth in, and therefore cures the diseases she causes by sympathy. You may usually find it all year long, except the year be extremely frosty. I thought that was 1 point for Sagittarius because this plant remains green and flowering right up until midwinter very often, and sometimes past it unless there's a really heavy frost. It's quick, sharp, and bitter in taste. That's a point number 2, at least for a fire sign rulership, because it's got that, because in Western astrology, bitterness was a hot taste. In Chinese, it was cold, but in Western, it was hot and fiery. And therefore found to be hot and dry, a singular herb for all inward wounds, exulcerated lungs, or other parts, by itself or boiled with other like herbs and being drank. In a short time, it eases all griping pains, windy and choleric humours in the stomach, spleen, or belly, helps the yellow jaundice by opening stoppings of the gall and liver, and melancholy by opening stoppings of the spleen, expels venom or poison, as also the plague, bit of a claim there. It provokes urine and women's courses. The decoction of it in wine, drank for some time together, here's another point for Sag, procures ease to them that are troubled with the sciatica or hip gout, as also the gout in hands, knees, or feet. If you put, by the way, they're using gout very loosely here. This is 17th century medicine, so they meant sciatica plus maybe gout and other rheumatic inflammation in the hands or feet. So I don't think we should take that as being too pathologically specific. There's also the gout in the hands, knees, or feet. If you put to the decoction some honey and a little burnt alum, it's excellently good to gargle any sore mouth or throat, and to wash the sores and ulcers in the privy parts of man or women. It speedily helps green wounds being bruised and bound thereto. And then he goes on for other things. Boiled with honey and verdigris helps fistulas, ulcers, and stays spreading or eating of cancers and ulcers. Topically helps the itch, scabs, wheals, and other breakings of any part of the body. And then he mentions a few other bits and bobs. So my main reasons for assigning this to Sagittarius, and it may be a little tendentious, are the fact that it is hot and dry. So it's to me, that's a fiery signature. It was assigned to the hips, like it had this, it's a remedy for sciatica. So it has this sort of hip directionality to its working. But you also mentioned the lungs, and the lungs are a Jupiter part of the body, which is of course the ruler of Sagittarius. And interestingly, if Culpeper says this is a plant of Venus, so Venus in Sagittarius might be expected to represent the hands and the hands and arms, because Sagittarius is the third sign from Libra. Therefore, Venus in Sagittarius, because Venus is Libra's sign, is kind of like Gemini, so the hands. And it's also Sagittarius, if Venus is in Sagittarius, it's in the 8th sign from Taurus, which would give us the private parts, the womb, the bowel. So you heard in that description that a lot of the workings of this plant were assigned to, the gout, the hip gout. But then also he described it affecting the hands. The feet is something else, but then that Jupiter also rules Pisces, which rules the feet. And he also said that there was several mentions of the belly and procures urine and women's courses. So there are a few, and sores and ulcers in the privy parts of man or woman. So there are a few bits. I think for me and so that my points in favor of this being a herb of Venus in Sag is it's a hot, dry, bitter herb. It stays green right until the midwinter most often. So it's in the Sagittarius time of year in the northern hemisphere. It has some action in the hips, and then its other medicinal actions can be appropriated to Jupiter regions of the body, like the lungs or possibly the feet, arguably, although they're really ruled specifically by Mercury, but perhaps Pisces at a push. But definitely to the parts of the body which are assigned to Venus in Sagittarius specifically by secondary derivation. So that's my pick. I mean, any thoughts, Ollie, on that?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I mean, I suppose it's one of those ones always more difficult because ground ivy is one I use quite a lot, and so it's very associated with Venus in my mind.
Yes.
So I'm sure it's the same for you, but I mean that stuff. I've never used it for the sciatica, so that's
Right.
quite interesting. You know, usually I'm using it for its anti-catarrhal properties and stuff like
Yes,
that.
and in modern herbal medicine, it's sort of been reinvented almost as an anti-catarrhal
Absolutely, yes.
remedy. Whereas if you read that, I mean, he does talk about the lungs.
He
So
does.
there is so it's not new, but I tend to think of it as you know, because it's a herb that I use a lot. I tend to think of it as a herb for sort of visceral inflammation, really, like, but it's a hot herb, so it's quite interesting. It can take down inflammation in the lungs and in the bowel,
Right.
unlike
Yes.
another Venus herb like plantain, which is just cooling and takes
Yes.
inflammation
Yes.
out of the
Yes.
epithelia. I think ground ivy has this interesting heating action as well, where it can take away that inflammation, but it also has this deeper anti-inflammatory action. So I've used it many times with people with joint pain in the hands, the hips, and the feet, and found it very effective, particularly if there's a combination of sort of inflammation in the guts or in the sort of female anatomy, like womb, and if there's inflammation in the lungs. So yeah, it often comes in as a supportive plant in prescriptions I've done for some autoimmune conditions. Well, because while it won't modulate the immune system, it will take down the inflammation a bit.
Yes. No. I mean, I will definitely be thinking about that. It's that's quite nice, and you know, it'd be nice to have the remedy, and it's another benefic as well. So
It is,
not
yeah.
too much of a step away from its traditional associations.
Yeah, and I think the other reason I use it so much is traditionally it was said to clear. It's a hot herb that clears choler and melancholy. You know what I
Right.
mean? So if you
Yes.
want
Yes.
something that you often get people who have like maybe they've got inflammation in the bowels, but you don't want to give them loads of cold herbs because
Yes. Yes.
that you know, so it's perfect for them. Because maybe they're overall really cold, but they've got inflammation in the bowels. So, like ground ivy is really good. And you know, you often get patients with sort of like they might have a mixture of melancholy and choler, like you know, they're really dry. And this herb,
Yes.
even though it's hot and dry, often works quite well in those
No.
prescriptions. So
Nice. Nice.
yeah, so interesting. And the Sagittarius assignation is perhaps questionable, but as I say, we both sort of struggled a bit with this one, and I don't think I'm far off with it.
I didn't, and
So,
I mean, anything that lets us peer deeper into like where a herb is coming from, sort of thing, is useful anyway, isn't it?
yeah,
So
sure.
I've definitely learned something today by
All right.
that solution.
Well, that is good. I mean, I can't remember the active constituents of it, but I think it's got a bunch of interesting saponins. It's in the lavender mint family.
Yes.
So it's got but it's not very high in essential oils like a lot of the lavender mint family are. So ground ivy, sesquiterpenes, which are often quite bitter, flavonoids, which are standard sort of antioxidant-y compounds. Some are anti-inflammatory, like apigenin that you find in other, and then triterpenoid glycosides like beta-acylic acids and oleanolic acid, which are often anti-inflammatory. So an interesting mix of sort of pretty gentle
And
anti-inflammatory
my
compounds.
tip for this herb if you are going to be picking it yourself,
Yeah.
it grows quite prolifically in my garden. Is that, and this is from Henrietta Kress, I think, actually, that
Right.
classically, it always says pick it when it's in flower, but it's a bastard to pick when it's flower because there's hardly any of it, and you'll be like for hours scrabbling around trying to get it. If you wait a few months into summer, or indeed even in autumn, you can just pull up tons of the stuff, and it works just as well. You just don't get the flowers, but it doesn't seem to make any difference.
Right.
Yeah, don't feel you have to do it in spring because you won't get as much. And
Okay. Okay. No, that's a really good tip. Thanks, Ollie. So it's better to. So what time of year would you say is best?
I would say late summer.
I was
Seems to be
distracted
tons of
by
it in
things on my computer.
late summer. Tends to be tons of it around late.
So what time of year did you say was best?
Late summer, early autumn.
Summer.
Yeah, late summer, early
Late.
autumn. Yeah.
Okay. That's really interesting. I have once gathered it because it grows and sort of like banks near where my sister and my dad live in Yorkshire. It grows on sort of like verges there, and I've gathered some in midwinter, like literally in January.
Why
before.
not? Yeah.
I mean, but obviously it's not optimal time of year to be gathering the herb because it's not at high strength at that time of year. But I was like, I needed something for a cough, and yeah. Anyway,
there it was. That's what
it was.
It's all about. Exactly.
Yes, exactly. All right. So what's your herb, Ollie?
Right. Well, I went for a non-trad one. So and this is an interesting herb for me. It's one I never used to use. It's it's not a European Western whole medicine herb. It's Pyrgophytum procumbens, or better known as devil's claw.
Okay. Let me just see if I can find it. Keep talking, but let me see if I can find a picture of them.
And particularly, I think, and it's an interesting one because I had originally, before I looked into this, I thought it's a Saturn herb because it's called devil's claw because the seed pods are like covered in spikes. And I thought, oh, that's a very Saturn signature, isn't it? And it's very good for the bones, which again is another Saturn signature. But I was looking into potential Sagittarian herbs, and I'm looking all these things up again. And actually, the plant as it grows in the wild is definitely not Saturnian. I mean, I think you can see down there, there's got these. That's the seed pod, but next to it, you can see the actual plant, which is like these big, lush, purpley flowers and like very lush sort of leaves.
Yes.
Which are a much more sort of Jupiterian signature than a Saturn one. Though the seed pod is definitely very spiky and Saturny. So
or the seed pod. The seed pod looks martial.
It does look martial, but it's not a hot herb, so it's more of a Jupiterian. And then I started looking into it more, and it's very anti-inflammatory, which is a good sort of benefic quality.
Right.
Slightly analgesic as well, which is also possibly a Saturn one. And it is good for the pain, rheumatism, and things. It's what I use it a lot in my rheumatic patients.
Right.
But interestingly, it's very good for the digestion, particularly the bile and things, and gastrointestinal conditions, the classic sort of Jupiter. And then the kicker for me is it's classically used, particularly for lower back pain and sciatica. Sagittarius, Jupiter in Sagittarius. And so I thought, that's interesting. And it's also this general sort of benefic effect. It's not that focus, it's doing all sorts of things. And it's almost, I don't know, do you use it at all in your practice?
I do. I have a couple of anecdotes about this herb, actually. I mean, it's as you say, it's a very good anti-inflammatory. I don't use it often because I tend to default a bit more I mean, I do use non-European herbs, but I tend to default a bit more towards European herbs if I can. But I mean, I use lots of non-Europeans like Schisandra and Withania and just stuff that we've magpied from other traditions. But so couple of one positive and one not so positive about this. I mean, it's a very useful anti-inflammatory, and it works by at least partially by COX-1 pathway inhibition. I think so.
I think so. That's right. Yes.
So I used it for a while in a patient who had as an adjunctive treatment in a patient.
COX-2 and TNF. That's
COX-2. All right. Thank you. So not COX-1. So it was a patient who had. What did he have? I think he had a lymphoma, but a very like one of the chronic, slow growing ones.
Oh yes,
like an older chap who had that, and put him on the Harpagophytum, or Hippos-Go-Phytum, as one of my friends insists on calling it, and that worked quite well to just sort of reduce his fever, and he had a bit of joint pain, back pain, and that took that away, because it just mainly the COX-1 inhibition, and that is also something that's indicated for that particular type of lymphoma. When I did a bit of research, it looked like inhibiting that pathway would often slow down the development spread of that particular chronic lymphocytic leukemia, or whatever it was, a type of lymphocytic leukemia. Anyway, so I thought that was interesting, and that was quite positive. And then the other one is a client is seeing me for years, and you may remember this client from Middlesex days, but for chronic joint issues, arthritis and back pain. Now, this client had been taking Devil's Claw tablets from Lambert's, company who manufactures tablets for years for this, with good results. She was very keen on getting them as tablets and having the prescription repeated.
Right. Yeah.
So I took over from another herbalist who she'd been seeing, and I filled the prescription for her every time. Then earlier this year, I saw the client and I noticed that her pulse was wonky. And so I said, have you seen the doctor recently? And they said, yes. And I said, did he take your pulse? And she said, no. So I said, I want you to go back to him and have him check your pulse, because I'm not happy with it. I didn't do a cardiovascular examination, but it was just her pulse was sufficiently arrhythmic. It was irregularly irregular, and a little bradycardic as well. It was a little bit slow. So I was like, okay, I'm not happy with that. So anyway, the doctor saw her, took her pulse, and sent her straight to referred her for a very urgent hospital appointment, and then they found she had atrial fibrillation.
Really?
Yes. So the reason this connects to Devil's Claw is that the patient then contacted me a couple of weeks later saying the insert in these Devil's Claw tablets said I shouldn't take it if I have heart problems. And I thought, okay, probably like overcautious, because there's nothing in the standard herb literature. There's no ADRs, adverse drug reactions, associated with Devil's Claw and heart stuff. But most of the websites say if you have a heart problem, don't use Devil's Claw. So I found, I think, what the root of this is, and it's some in vivo animal research from a South African journal, which makes sense because this is an African herb. I think using isolated guinea pig hearts or something, but it showed that Devil's Claw extract could induce arrhythmia in these hearts.
Really?
So yes,
right.
And so I'm thinking, oh bloody hell, this woman's been taking these Devil's Claw tablets as an alternative anti-inflammatory for nigh on 2 decades.
Whoa.
So I wonder whether that has led to so obviously we've got her off the Devil's Claw now. We've got her on white willow and turmeric and a bunch of other stuff.
And has the arrhythmia gone?
Well, no, because she was in atrial fibrillation. They actually diagnosed her with, she's in her late 70s. They diagnosed her with early heart failure. So she's having to go on a bunch of different drugs, the standard ones like blood thinners and antiarrhythmics and all of that. I'm working around it. But the issue here is that this very little known, so the little known side effect that might be derived from animal studies. So it's not certain at all, but it's very suspicious to me that this person who's been taking it for 2 decades, and then there's this bit of research in guinea pig hearts showing that it could induce arrhythmia. So that made me think maybe what we're looking at is a sort of Marzi herb in a way, like a herb that is,
it's interesting because it's not that stimulating. I mean, it's
no.
It's not.
I don't know the herb. The only thing we know about it is the seed pod. It's called Devil's Claw because the seed pod looks like
It'd be interesting to know what the sort of local usage was. Before.
Yes.
Yeah.
The traditional use, because the seed pod does look like an H.R. Geiger drawing, doesn't it? I mean, it looks like
absolutely,
some crazy aggressive thing, and apparently, like cows get it trapped on their feet, and it causes a lot of pain. So the seed is like this weapon of war thing. And it literally spreads by getting latched onto animals' legs, and they carry it rather painfully and disperse the plant. So the plant's reproductive strategy is by causing
By
pain.
causing pain, yes.
And there are, of course, Mars-ruled herbs that, I mean, one of the signatures for Mars is spiny, thorny, painful, bitter, stinging, burning, yellow, or orange. Well, we've got two of those at least here. We've got bitter. Devil's claw is very bitter. You can't take it if you have hyperacidity. That's one of the main contraindications.
Well, I'm just occurred to me, actually,
Mm.
probably my original Saturn one, putting it into Mars in Saturn, where, of course, Saturn is exalted in Capricorn, I mean.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's very good for all the bones and things, etc. That would make a lot more sense, in fact.
Maybe, but as you say, the flower itself here, the plant looks
Yeah,
pretty,
it doesn't
it's pretty
look very Martian,
showy.
doesn't it?
No, but the plant still could be Martian. This is where it gets really tricky, folks, because you have to sort of, the primary assignation has to be the planet, and then the sign is a secondary dress up.
Yeah,
But
so
you need
Mars
to
in
get the planet
Capricorn
right
could work.
first.
Could work for me.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards Mars for this plant just because of its
Okay.
bitterness. It's highly aggressive reproductive strategy.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's anti-inflammatory. Well, so some other Mars plants, like think of nettles, for example. You know.
Yeah.
There,
True.
there are, and even gentian, a traditional
Okay.
Mars plant, and gentian has those beautiful big blue flowers, but it's
It
just
does.
classified under
It
Mars
does.
because it's so bastardingly bitter. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. But
Okay.
but
So that's
but
useful as well.
it could still be sad, Jolly, because as you say, it's
It is
anti-inflammatory
that.
for the
It is
hips.
that. Lot of that. That sort of arthritis around that area and the sciatica is done. So it could be, as you say, Mars in Sag.
Yeah, and it's got that, and the heating element is there. It's bitter. It has a hot thing, and even the thing of like, if it is like you can't take it if you've got any sort of heart arrhythmia, well, that's because it obviously stimulates the heart muscle a bit, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Nice.
I think yeah, something. So it could definitely be a Mars in Sag. I
Cool.
mean, this is something that we, as you say, Ollie, we probably need to look into more of the traditional uses and see it growing. But even I mean, the fact that it, mind you, I was going to say the fact that it grows in arid ground, but then so does every plant in Africa, and I think it'd probably be unreasonable to suggest that every plant in Africa is ruled by Mars. So yeah, so maybe forget that thing that I was just about to say. But okay.
Interesting.
Okay, I have one more plant, but it's very tendentious. So we're getting increasingly tendentious as I go on. And this is, if I can find, I've got a picture of it somewhere. It's this one, which is Iberis amara or sciatica cress.
Wow,
so clues in the name.
Yeah. Wow.
Now it's in Culpeper, but I've never used it. I have never used this plant, and I think now reading about it, it's like, oh my god, why haven't I used it? I've got to get it and try it. Now this is only used externally traditionally.
Okay.
So Culpeper says sciatica cresses. It's about 2 feet tall. It has little white flowers. See if I can find another picture. So quite pretty little flowers, but it's in the Brassicaceae, so the cabbage family.
Right.
So you can see that's clearer, that it looks more of a cabbage flower now. So I'm not sure that's it. That looks a bit.
Got the right flowers. The little
Yeah, it does.
Flowers.
So sciatica cresses. So Culpeper says of it. Rises up with a round stalk 2 feet high, spreads into diverse branches. Lower leaves are somewhat larger than the upper. All of them cut or turn on the edges, somewhat like garden cresses, but smaller. The flowers are small and white, growing at the tops of branches. Blah, 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 blah. It's a saturnine plant, according to Culpeper. The leaves, but especially the root, taken fresh in summertime, beaten or made into a poultice or salve with grease and applied to the places pained with the sciatica to continue, it's very specific, for 4 hours if it be a man and 2 hours if it be a woman. The place afterwards bathed with wine and oil mixed together, then wrapped with wool or skins after they have sweat a little, will assuredly cure not only the same disease in hips, hocklebone, or other of the joints, as gout in the hands or feet, but all other old griefs of the head, as inveterate rheums and other parts of the body that are hard to be cured. And if the former griefs of any parts, if of the former griefs any parts remain, the same medicine after 20 days is to be applied again. So really interesting. The same is also effectual in the diseases of the spleen, and applied to the skin takes away the blemish thereof, whether there be scars, leprosy, scabs, or scurf, which though it ulcerate the part, so it's a caustic herb to some degree, yet that is to be helped afterwards with a salve made of oil and wax. Esteem this as another secret. So he's saying this sounds like a quite, a pretty maybe slightly caustic or strong herb that you'd apply once for a few hours, perhaps in an ointment, as he's suggesting, followed by some, I'm guessing the application of the oil and vinegar, oil and wine rather, would be to increase dermal penetration, because you're combining ethanol and fat. So,
or just wash it out, get everything out.
Yes, or the opposite, to get any remains of it off the skin.
As you say, and that would be a Saturn rulership. It's very caustic.
Yeah, it's got some, or Mars. Mars either is burning, or Saturn, it's got some toxicity.
But the bone thing here, it's sort of, burning for bone sort of thing.
Yes, so, but he's saying interesting. A lot of the cresses he puts under Mars, which are interesting because they're caustic nature, but this one, for some reason, he assigns to Saturn. But I wonder, just because of the specification, it's literally called sciatica cress.
Yes.
So obviously that would relate it either to the lumbar spine or most probably to the hips, because that's where the pain is felt in the buttocks and hips mostly. Yes. So even though it originates from the lumbar spine, that's where the pain is experienced.
And what does he call them? One called huckles or something, which would seem like
hucklebone.
The upper leg.
Hucklebone. Yeah. So I mean, I dug up a few other bits, Nick, and say it's not something I've used. So just Wikipedia says Iberis amara is also called wild candy tuft, rocket candy tuft, and bitter candy tuft. It's native to Belgium, France, Germany, Great Britain, Italy, Spain, and Switzerland. It's been introduced all over the world. Branched and erect annual. Doesn't say anything about the medicinal properties there. It's in the cabbage family, as we say, so it's probably got some of those interesting cabbage things. Henriette Cress's amazing website talks about sciatica cress. This is from a family herbal in the 1800s, written by John Hill, herbalist. He says it's a foot high, pretty wild plant. The stalk is round, firm, and upright. The leaves are small, longish, and pale green. Flowers stand at the tops. The leaves are used. They are recommended greatly in the sciatica or hip gout. They are to be applied externally and repeated as they grow dry. The best way is to beat them with a little lard. It is an approved remedy, and it is strange that it is not more in use.
There we go.
Interesting. And then lastly, I looked on PubMed, and there were several bits of research. But the one that I found is mechanisms involved in the anti-inflammatory and vascular effects of Iberis amara extract. So there are some researchers looking into these old herbals and finding things. Obviously, they're all working for the pharmaceutical company and digging for drugs, whereas obviously we think they should be digging for the actual plants and telling people about them. But so the anti-inflammatory potential and vasoprotective effects of an Iberis amara extract in a rat model of arthritis were investigated. Long been known for its anti-inflammatory properties on account of its active constituents, including curcubitacins. So that's those are curcubitacins. Yes. So those compounds, you find them in bryony and other interesting. I'm thinking more. Skullpepper might be wrong about this. I'm thinking this plant might be a Mars plant. It's got curcubitacins in it. It's caustic. It's like cresses. And I'm thinking he probably gave it to Saturn because he was thinking, it's beneficial for the joints.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes, I'm sure.
But I'm thinking this is a Mars in Sag plant. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so maybe. I can see exactly what you mean.
I'd have to see it growing because
we'll have to grow some. We'll have to grow some, and we'll have to have a look and try and find someone most sciatica who wants to be.
Yeah. But curcubitacins are found in bryony, and they're quite toxic, and they often provoke. What was the traditional term for it? Oh God, when you apply counter-inflammation, is that it?
Yes, yeah.
Is that? I don't think that's quite correct.
Not the right word. But
counter-irritation.
So the pain goes away because of the counter. Yes. They cancel each other out, basically.
Totally. So you apply a high-grade irritant to an inflamed joint, and the body produces anti-inflammatory substances in response to the inflammatory thing that you're applying externally and relieves the pain in the joint. And this is, you know, this is like where people use bee stings for therapy, where people use urtication, where you beat the joints with nettles. And these things can be very, and even mustard, you know, these things could be very effective for arthritis pain, actually.
Yeah.
So the cucurbitacins are also taken internally in small amounts, like in bryony, which you have to be super careful with. Can actually have an immune modulating effect as well, and take down systemic inflammation, but they can also increase systemic inflammation. So you've got to be careful. And then it's got some standard sort of Chiampherol, I think it's a flavonoid. I'm not 100% sure, but it's a bit anti-inflammatory, I think. And synapic acid is common to a lot of the Brassicaceae. It's found in a lot of the mustard plants. Don't know what it does. Need to look it up, but I think it's a glucosinolate. Anyway, whatever.
Anyway,
yeah,
brilliant, nice one. I shall be definitely looking for some seeds for next year, or a tiny plant.
Yeah, me too. If you get some, Ollie, like yeah, let me know, because I
will.
might grow it, but my garden is tiny and also ravaged by foxes at the moment, so I daren't plant anything new. It's sort of
nightmare, yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to gradually fortify the bed. So my herb garden is turning into a mini Alcatraz, basically. But like once all the beds are caged, I'll be able to start planting.
I just have a problem with voracious voles, but it's just a matter of you can't.
There's always some critter.
Very small. I know. Anyway, it's to try us. All right, Marcos, that was a fascinating discussion, and
it was interesting. I mean, well, anybody watching this, thank you if you made it all the way to the end, and hello to any new subscribers, and thank you, and please do like it, share it, do all things. And if any of you have any ideas about medicinal plants or herbs that you might put into Sagittarius or assigned to Sagittarius, please pop them in the comments, because we'd be very interested to see them.
Definitely.
All right, thanks, Ollie.
Thank you, Marcos.
Bye, guys.